for various press agencies and publications. Her writing focuses on gender and conflict in Manipur. Anungla Longkumer can best be described as a free individual discovering her way through creative pursuits in music, writing, filmmaking, and folk traditions. Having traveled and lived outside Nagaland most of her life, she is now based in Dimapur. Dolly Kikon is a social anthropologist. She teaches anthropology and development studies at the University of Melbourne. They will be in conversation with Urvashi Butalia, who is a publisher and writer based in Delhi. Co founder of India's first feminist publishing house, Kali for Women, she now runs Zubaan Books. She has long been involved in the women's movement in India and writes for newspapers, journals, magazines, and books on a wide range of issues to do with women and gender. May I please request you to join your hands to welcome this very distinguished panel on stage. Ma'am, may we please have all of you on stage, please? Samom ma'am, Kiko ma'am, Longkumer ma'am, and of course, Butalia ma'am. I shall make that Anjulika, Dolly, Urvashi ma'am, and Anungla.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. We've also been listening, like you, to the really interesting discussion that has gone before. And some of the issues that you were discussing will find quite interesting, but quite different parallels in what we are going to talk about. The nice thing about this festival is that the authors get introduced already, so we don't have to spend any time in introducing them. But I do want to say that our panel is called The Seven Sisters Speak, but you don't actually see seven sisters on stage. Of the seven sisters who are going to speak, there are only three here. That's 1, 2, and 3. And those three also actually are two, because two of them belong to the same family, except that they belong to different families within the same family. So the numbers thing is a little bit confusing. So what we're going to do is to start by, I'm going to ask Dolly Kikon, who is on my extreme left, to actually explain to us who are the seven sisters, or what are the seven sisters, and why are there seven of them?
Hello, Urvashi. Can you all hear me? Woohoo! All right. Thank you. That's a lovely question to start with. Yeah, I mean, as a feminist, I love talking about sisterhood. So yeah, way to go. But here's the story: the seven sisters, as such, that a term that you have come to refer to the Northeast, was actually coined as an administrative category in the 1970s, when there was a reorganization of state in the Brahmaputra Valley. And it was coined by a journalist who later became an administrator, coined as Seven Sisters so that they could emphasize on a unity in the region. Later on, it went on to become a cultural theme. So if you look at tourism brochures, if you look at the Northeast Council programs, you will often come across the term Seven Sisters. Today, you use it for diversity of reason, one being cultural, but historically important to remember that it was coined as a governance administrative category during the reorganizations of states. Yeah.
And it, of course, covers the region broadly known as the Northeast. But I'm going to ask Anjulika on my right to come in with an additional story to the Seven Sisters, because after the Seven Sisters came, something else happened.
Yeah. Just like we come from the Northeast, I come from a family of 8 sisters. And we are 8 of us in the same family, but each of us are so different from each other. So it's like we are sort of brought in together by that familial relationship. but each of us has unique traits, unique characteristics, and so it would be wrong to say that all of us are alike just because we are sisters in the family. That being said, the seven sisters now has a brother, Sikkim, which was brought in later on because probably because of the geographical the fact that it's very near to the seven sisters. And we were discussing before during lunch about our session, and then we thought that it sort of like, now that we are not called eight sisters, we are called seven sisters and one brother. And to me, coming from a family of eight sisters, it sort of reflects the patriarchal nature of our societies, where the rush for having sons is so important that if you don't, have son the first time, second time, you keep having children once, then daughters after daughters. Ultimately, you give up and adopt a brother. So we have an adopted brother, which is Sikkim.
So the seven sisters now have a brother. They're not eight sisters. And the family's been waiting for a long time to get that boy. He's come in. So the family is now complete. So now these two women on my left, Anungla and Dolly, come from Nagaland, which is one of the states that one of the sisters. And Anjulika comes from Manipur, which is another of the sisters. And she used the metaphor of the family, but within the family also there's a lot of diversity. So Anungla, would you like to just talk a little bit about how the two of you coming from Nagaland are actually different inside the family?
Yeah, sure. Shall I just use that? Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks for that, Urvashi. Yeah, so Dolly and I both hail from Nagaland. Yeah, we are both from Nagaland, but we belong to different communities. Nagaland, as you may know, has something like 16 recognized tribes. And I belong to the Ao tribe, whereas Dolly belongs to the Lotha tribe. So we are really very ethnically diverse, even within Nagaland. And if you cross borders and go across to the other states, the diversity is like it just grows and grows and grows. And in the Northeast, we have something like 4,000 kilometers of international border. Whereas we are connected to mainland India by just a small stretch of 32 kilometers. So I think it's quite, people just lump us together and, say like we are from the Northeast. And it's very difficult to put one face, to Northeast, because we are, like I had said earlier, we're so ethnically diverse. And there's so little known about the Northeast, like people in the other states of India actually know very little, and they just lump us together as, coming from one region. That said, I'd like to say that, the Northeast personality is evolving all the time, is evolving all the time, whereas people in the other states are like stuck with one image of us, so it's kind of difficult for us, at least for me personally, to say like, Northeast is just like one entity or, one person.
So you're saying that's how you're stereotyped, or that's how the Northeast is stereotyped, but that inside there is a lot of diversity, which is also not static.
Yes.
It's changing all the time.
Yes.
Yeah. But isn't there a way in which, and this is a question for any of you, or all of you, isn't there a way in which that catch-all category of the Northeast is also something that's at times convenient to own and at times uncomfortable to live with, because it's imposed from without as something to homogenize you, so you're resisting that, but it's also a convenient sort of thing to sometimes describe a region, a people's. Would you say that, or would you reject it altogether?
Although we are really ethnically diverse, we also share many commonalities, and it's like when you talk about, our Naga tribes, they've been also divided into like, by the international border in Myanmar. So like the Kyamungan tribes, the Konyak tribes of Nagaland also have their brothers and sisters across the border, you know. And actually our landscape also is just, I mean, we just continue, you know, into Myanmar, but now it's like a separate country, you know. You belong, you know, to that country and we belong to this country. So in that way, actually, on the ground, we are very, very tolerant about our own diversities and we understand each other. And even though we have, you know, we eat different kinds of food and all, like, we still share a lot of common, you know, food items as well. So that's where we identify and relate with each other. So on the ground, actually, we're really one, you know. We are kind of united. And I think politically, there's a lot of that conflict brought in because of our diversity. But on the ground, we are actually very tolerant of each other. And we do make jokes, you know, about each other and stuff like that. But it's in a kind of good humor, you know. So I also personally feel that if we do actually come through, you know, in the political sense of being like one and united, we could be a really big force. Yeah, we could be a strong.
Anju, if you could come into this and if you could also address the fact when Anungla says that on the ground, Northeast, people in the Northeast are united, some of those unities and some of those support groups and overlaps have been built by women's solidarities across the Northeast. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. See, many, some of the few people who know about the Northeast, or maybe I'll speak specifically about my state, about Manipur, is about either the exotic part of it, the colorful dresses, the dances, or they know about the conflict going on there and how 12 women disrobed in front of the public, in front of the army, saying that the army should go back. But they think that even across the community in Manipur, there are conflicts. Yes, there are conflicts. Just like in a family, there are conflicts, but I would like to talk about one of my experiences in Manipur. One of the first sexual violence victim in Manipur was a girl from Ukhrul. She was a Tangkhul and so a Naga tribe, and she belongs to a Tangkhul tribe, which is part of the larger Naga community. But when she was killed, there were women coming in from the valley areas. I belong to the Meitei community, which is basically a Hindu community. I mean, converted into Hindu. While the most of the people, Tangkhul tribes, they are Christian. But when she was raped and killed, all the women came together and they formed a union. And small areas like this, in small instances like this, the women come together and they form a kind of solidarity, which I think even now across the male community, they have not been able to reach out to this level. So when there are problems in the valley area also, there are talks happening between especially between the women community. So I think the women community themselves have been able to form together. And if you come down to Manipur, one of the first touristic place they'll take you to is the Ima market, or it's supposed to be called Nupi Kaitel, which is women's market. But everyone says Ima market because we address the women as Ima, as mothers. There you will find women from across communities sitting together, selling things together. The Meiteis, they don't eat, many of the Meitei, especially the older generation, they don't eat chicken or pork or many of the non-veg items. But they'll be selling things together. And among the community, among the women, there is a concept of itasanaba, it's like we become friends. So the women from the hills, they'll come with ginger and like gooseberries and other items like fish and other items and come down to the valley. And then the women in the valley, when they come to sell the item in our house, even if not in the market, sometimes they come to the house and the first thing they'll say is, Ita, I've come with this. And they become such regular friends. And so that kind of solidarity, I think, is a unique part of the whole of Northeast. Even when we go to, like most of us studied in Delhi, Kolkata, anywhere, somewhere else. One of the first things that we notice when we were students, when we go to the community college, is like even from the back side, the way that person walks, we know that this person is from the Northeast. Right? We know, and suddenly we feel that affinity. and I think that is the kind of solidarity or the link between us, which is there. I hope.
To use the mic.
I'd agree with that because within Nagaland, like Dolly and I, we are like from different tribes. But once we come out of Nagaland, we are just Naga, you know. Like a lot of students in Delhi, Bombay, I mean, wherever they study, we're just Naga, you know. And it's only when, like I myself grew up in Shillong, you know, in another state, which is a matrilineal society. So it was like a little different for me. But when I came to Nagaland, it was like the first question people will ask you is, who's your father? Which village are you from? And which clan are you from, you know? So like the division just go down. Whereas in Shillong, where I grew up, I was just a Naga, you know? So it's...
Dolly?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a mic, Hal.
About
So about the discomfort or the owning of the Northeast identity, and you had told us a really interesting story about the book that you found in the library. Yeah, do you want? Because I think that encapsulates what we're talking about very nicely.
Yeah, so about owning or about and the challenges, you know, it's there. Northeast India is there. So get on with it, right? Get real. It is both a geographical, I think, location, a region. I see it as a federation. Like Anung was saying, we come from different tribes, and it takes a long time to learn one another's tribal languages. It'll take me a long time to learn Metelong. But I grew up in a very cosmopolitan foothill town called Dimapur in Nagaland. And that's the only station till now in Nagaland where you have the railway station and also the airport. And next to my house was the Vivekananda mission. So my parents, when I was growing up, and when I was a very small child, a toddler, my first memories is both of the church and also the Vivekananda mission, right? Because my parents were members of the committee there, and every year on his birthday or on any celebration, we would sit with the Bengali community who was inside the mission where there was a hospital, a temple, a school. And so that is the kind of cosmopolitan, I think, solidarity and exposure with which I grew up. My parents never stopped me from going there and singing Ramakrishna Saranam, Ramakrishna Saranam, and also to go to a church and learn my hymns and prayers. So the region that I see is a very diverse region, and I'm very proud. Of course, in discourse, right, if you have to pretend to be an intellectual and say, I want to criticize it, you can say that, oh, you know, who's periphery and who's center. But I want to, if you have been in the morning session of this amazing panel where Ashish Nandi and I think, yes, Sugata Bose were talking, and also the film session after that where we had the literature people and also people from the films talking. The notion of the universal and the local, right? The local and really the micro and how we see our world is our universal. For me, as a Naga, growing up in Dimapur next to Ramakrishna Mission, going to church, going to the mission, growing up, that is my world. And so today when I say I'm from the Northeast, it's not only a notion of Naganess that I embrace. It's my memory of the mission. It's all the Pandits I met. It's that Bengali doctor who checked my eyes as a child. And so that's my memory. So I'm very proud. And the challenging part is there, of course, because it breaks my heart when the region is constantly tagged to conflict or, you know, something that's really retrograde. And to say that the book that you were asking me, Urvashi, and it came up during a lunch meeting, was that 2 days ago before I came to Kolkata, day before yesterday, I was working in the library and I saw a book titled Peculiar Cultures of the Himalayan People. And the face was Yeah, the face was a woman who looked like me from the northeast region of India. I looked at the blurb of this amazing scholar who wrote this, and he's a Sanskrit scholar, a linguist from Punjab University, right? And I was like, wow. Um, it's nothing peculiar, right, to grow up in such a beautiful region, and also and also actually to look at what and also to witness what Anjulika was saying about the conflict, but at the same time the solidarity, the hope, and the fact that no matter how much you say, oh, I don't know anything about the region, and you might just drag one of us after this talk and say, is it safe to come, right? It is. So you're welcome. Please look up the map if you're wondering sitting here, and we would love to talk to you all after this. Thanks.
Actually, in the conversation that we were having before this panel, while we were discussing what we talk about, I was saying to Anungla, Anju, and Dolly that I have never been asked to be on a panel which is about Punjabi women or Punjab, the region, because somehow that is taken as the norm or the center or whatever, and all the places that are kind of geographically located at a distance from the assumed center are somehow seen as the periphery. So, but this notion really needs to be turned on its head, right? So, you guys see yourself as a periphery? No, you have to pick up the mic and speak into it. What's the definition of periphery?
Yeah, that's a very valid question. A periphery would be something which is like not away from me, but I am my own world. The place where I live is my world. It's the center of my universe. So then it becomes my center, and I'm like I might be your periphery, but from the way I look, you are my periphery, right? So that. And especially, like, we go down lower than that, and suddenly, like, your center and periphery ends with the kitchen and your house. So it's all a matter of definition and how you look at things. I think the best way to look at it is not to look at it at the center periphery thing. Just look at things like, like you are exploring new worlds. Like the world doesn't end with my world. It ends like,
Yeah, come.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Urvashi, for the center periphery thing. And I think taking from Anjulika, it's a very important question. For me, as an anthropologist, the center periphery thing has its origins in the securitization of the region, right? And also the kind of policies that is made in Delhi. So center periphery in relation not so much to Calcutta, but actually I think in post-independent India has to do with Delhi and the Northeast. And really through the lens of security, through the lens of control, and through the lens of a very colonial framework of remoteness. And I think we need to question, and we are here. I think we are spunky, we are beautiful, we are confident, and we are enjoying Calcutta. So maybe today's a day to get rid of that.
Thank you, Dolly, for actually addressing that historical bit, which I wanted to come to, that how did the center periphery thing get actually created and articulated? And of course, as it plays out on the ground, it means a lot of things which are very, very difficult to live with, because many of the states are border states. So there is a sense of control, and there is a way in which the marginalization continues to be enforced, which can't be very easy to live with. Okay, I want to ask all of you now to talk a little about the work that you do. And both Anungla and Anjulika have been engaged in collecting stories by women from their particular regions. And Dolly is a scholar who does research also on Nagaland, a lot of it, and very interesting research, and also writes very moving other narratives. So I want each of you to talk a little about your work. Yeah. Anju, do you want to start?
Yeah. Basically, as the introduction went, I'm an independent journalist. So for a long time,
a very spunky journalist.
So for some time, sometime now, I've been I've been writing on the gender aspects of conflict, but my other interest lies in literature, because I come from a literature background, and also I've grown up listening to stories and having like a group of friends who really reads a lot. So Juban gave me an opportunity to work with women journalists. So this was something like it's like I've won a lottery kind of thing. I've always liked telling women's story, and I've liked the stories they write. So bringing that together. So what I'm doing right now is I'm bringing it together, and the women write originally in Manipuri. So we have engaged a group of young translators, and we are bringing it, a group of, this is an anthology which would have 27 stories. So ranging from one of the first women writers of Manipur, Maharaj Kumari Binodini, the princess, and people as young as Sapam Switi, who's just started writing. So these are women writing mostly in Manipuri, a few of young people who writes originally in English, and a few from across community also, not just Meitei, but we have Tangkhul writers, we have Muslim writers, and we are trying to focus on a very interesting aspect of their writing, because so far in Manipuri literature, the men had a very, it was a race which is very uneven. The men had a very early start. The women started writing only in the late 1960s. So the first books were published only after 1965. But in the process of a few decades, we are trying to find out where do the women writers look at themselves in their own writings, in the context of their upbringing, their education, and the society that they live in. How do they see themselves in the kind of patriarchal, traditional, very what to say, very obstructive, limiting society that we are in, and how they are trying to go out from it. Many of the women writers have not studied outside of Manipur. They know concepts of feminism or of gender consciousness only later in their life. But it's very interesting to note that even before they know that there's such a thing as feminist theory or gender narratives, they've started questioning the kind of world that they live in. I think it'll be very interesting, and the book will be out very soon, and I hope you will read it and give us all a good feedback.
And one of the interesting things that is also about Manipur is the formation of writers' societies.
Yeah.
So there is a men's society and a women writers.
Yeah, there are a lot of women literary groups in Manipur. One of the first concepts why they started the literary groups is because there are no publishing houses in Manipur. So these literary groups started as sort of chit funds. They started pulling in money. So every now and then, once they have enough money, one of them will say, okay, I'll publish mine, and the next one is your turn, kind of thing. So, but for the first time, the group that we are engaged with is a group of women writers only. So this is also very interesting.
Okay, I've just been told that we must finish in 10-15 minutes because there's a storm warning. So we have to, but I'm just going to ask Anungla and Dolly. So even the elements are against the Northeast, you see, now. So, but never mind, we will battle on. And
But it's very good we bought the storm.
yeah. And your stories are completely different because you're also Nagaland is English is the
Yes.
main language.
Yes,
Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, so
Hold
thank you,
it.
Urvashi, for the challenge and the invitation, to gather stories by women from Nagaland. And I was happily surprised that, most of the stories talk about trying to break the invisible barriers, in our society. We come from a very strong patriarchal society.
That's
Yeah.
better.
So it's been a long time now. Like, while looking out for stories, I couldn't find many that addressed patriarchy and women abuse and stories like that. But when I sent out word to writers, and Zuban are looking for new writers, so they were like a lot of debutant writers, yeah, who sent in their stories. I was really, really happy that they were addressing all these subjects, And it was like I left it like open genre, but with a focus on belonging, self, and identity. And like I said again, I was really happy that they've begun to talk about it, begun to talk about women's abuse and, the oppressive patriarchal system that we live in. And I was also happily surprised to find that women are writing a lot of poetry as well as short stories. So the collection is a combination of all that, including personal essays. Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed also was, and this is, I think, I'm wondering if it's happening across the Northeast, that younger women, and in your collection also, young women are exploring their own traditions, whether oral traditions, whether folk traditions. There was a lot in the stories about tattooing and the art of tattooing and how that's handed down through women. So,
well, it's like a very long story, but I feel that us in Nagaland, we are a displaced people, because, foreign forces came into our land and discouraged the passing on. It was an oral tradition in Nagaland. But when the British came in and then they stopped all our traditions, because also in a way, for example, the tattooing was associated with practices like headhunting. So it was like a very abrupt stop, and all our forefathers were discouraged from passing on a lot of knowledge. A lot of knowledge. So now, and in Nagaland is like almost 99% Christian now, 90% Christian. So I find that a lot of the young people, they are actually neither here nor there, but there's a lot of introspection going on now, I find. And so they are also harking back, and trying to explore like where it is that we are coming from and trying to, bring that into their, into their work like that.
Thanks, Anungla. Dolly?
About writing, I think I think listening to both Anjulika and Anung, I'll continue from there. Nagas have an oral culture, right? So in many ways, like many families, in my family, I'm first generation, both university, college, taking up writing, taking up research. So in that way, when you look at writing as such, for a lot of students, I would say, because I'm in research, I have been very, very inspired by teachers. And one of the very early on mentoring institutions that came to my life when I was an undergrad was Kali for Women. And Urvashi was there. And in a sense, I think reading what was being printed there was very different from the textbook. And so I think in that way, for me as a researcher, as a tribal feminist, my path took a very different trajectory. Very briefly sharing with you the kind of things that I've written so far. My writings on women, gender, violence, militarization is something very close to me. And mind you, that's not what I ended up doing, even for my PhD. That's such a personal political field for me. I'm very, I think, happy about the collaboration that I was part of in 2014, 15, 16 with Zuban, where we had 60 women from South Asia doing on sexual violence and impunity. We have 4 or 5 volumes of the book, so if you're interested, just look at some of the writings that we did with amazing women, activists, practitioners, journalists, and scholars across South Asia. The second strand of my writing that I've done, my first book is on political economy and militarization. It's called Living with Oil and Coal. And that's something that I was really, really fascinated with. So when I talk about center periphery, just to put a second part, the market plays a very important role, even in the production and the origin of what is Northeast India today. So with the center periphery thing, the second conceptual thing that we need to key into that is the notion of the frontier and the northeast region as an enclave economy. If you look at oil, if you look at tea, timber, labor, people like me who kind of wash your hair, cut your like toenail, nails all over. And so that's something that really fascinated me. For my second book, I ended up doing on northeast migrants, so kind of like tribal indigenous migrants who look like us, serving you all over India. So it was a multi-sited fieldwork all the way from Trivandrum, Varkala to Bombay, Pune. The third book that I finished is on Conflict City. So it's a very personal ethnography that I ended up writing on Dimapur. And Dimapur is a place, even if you look at Lonely Planet or all these amazing trip advisors where you want to go to Northeast to experience that exotic thing, right? Like the feather dancing and all. There's one sentence about Dimapur. And if you come from a city like that, you'll know exactly what I feel this afternoon. It's like, get out of the city as soon as possible, right? It is horrible, the roads, the dust.
It's full of dust.
It's full of dust. And so I was thinking of, how do you love? You see what I'm saying? How do you continue to love a place like that? How do we continue to love, difficult places? And so the third book that I wrote, it's with Oxford University Press, and I think that lady is going to meet me. I think the agent is sitting somewhere. So it's with that. So in a way, you can see my madness and also my passion from the region has led me to look at different things, but not really seriously exotic culture or tribal community. Maybe I'll come to that later, but for now, I'm looking at fun things and things that have complex stories. Yeah.
So, thank you. I'm going to have to close this. I just want to say that you've heard these kick-ass women, and if we'd been able to continue, you would have heard many more strongly political statements and fun things. One of the things they're doing is, they're all first-generation women who are researching, writing, creating knowledge, but also, very importantly, questioning their own societies, while at the same time questioning the marginalization of their societies. So, like no tourist brochure, this is a different look at the Northeast, so welcome to the Northeast. Thank you very much. If you want to talk to the speakers, they will be with their books in the book tent, and we can continue this conversation, but we can't do anything about nature, so we have to stop right now because they're very anxious, and rightly so. Thank you all very much. Thank you, the three of you, for a great panel.
Anjulika, Anungla, Dolly, we could have remained listening to you for quite a bit longer. And Urvashi ma'am, of course. But please do, you can walk across to the storybook kiosk where they will be there to give you the real view of the Northeast. Or actually, there is not one real view, different perspective of the Northeast than the scene and the landscapes that we see. But it is now time for me to say bye and thank you and to welcome the next panel on. Our next session is titled Cinemar Shera. Soumitra Chatterjee, Mostofa Sarwar Farooqui, and Onik Dotto on moments when Bangla cinema wowed the world, in conversation with Sangeeta Datta. This is also the launch of 100 Essential Films, edited by Sangeeta Datta and